it's only in the last 10 or 15 years we've begun to have really a number of massive effects on the population, not only psychotronics, but as you mentioned, drug use, change in music. These things coincide in the last 15 years.
That's right.
They've almost made a suicidal world.
That's right.
And, you know, as you come into an area like this, you realize this is one of the few oases of sanity left in the world. Let me give you an example. Those of you who know San Francisco, I was looking for a shortcut in the 280 freeway in San Francisco the other day, and I cut through some side streets. Boom, right through my rear windshield, somebody threw the steel base of a bumper jack. That thing weighs, what, 10 pounds, shattered my rear windshield. Fortunately, as I heard it, I accelerated, so it landed on the seat, it didn't hit me. That is the extent of violence in the cities. This is peaceful San Francisco. My car now, today, is in the shop. When I get back, it'll have a new rear windshield in. And the cities are disintegrating. There's no question about that. I mean, this is, I call this an oasis of sanity, and because this disintegration is going to continue. It's not all Soviet, it's not all Alpha waves. It's not all drugs, it's not any one thing. It's a combination of things in which all societies are disintegrating. And this is going to accelerate in the coming decade.
It's an era of history.
Yes.
And it's happened before.
Yes.
You can look at it in prophecy, astrology, all different areas and ways.
Yes.
I think this particular area that you're into is very fascinating because it could make one feel helpless if one, again, didn't have the power of God to lean back upon. This idea that something can influence your mind with such intensity, especially if you would consider yourself a target, because you have creative, original thinkers, as you say. This is an oasis of individuals and individualism.
Well, you've explained why you left Malibu and came up here. It really didn't hit me till I got here yesterday evening, and I first saw daylight here at 6 o'clock this morning. You know, the San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, these major cities, Washington. I've been in each of these cities over the last few months. Suicidal, self-destructive. And you come here, and I haven't met anybody yet whom I would say was self-destructive or suicidal. What impresses me is the willingness to do what has to be done with pride, with love, productive things, which is the complete opposite to what is going on in society as a whole.
Well, this is to put it in biblical terms, this is a peculiar people that you find here. And that peculiar people has seen and read the handwriting on the wall in those cities, and they've said, we want to come apart with our families.
Yes.
And be independent of this downward spiral, that is unexplainable, really, in its point of origin.
The tragedy is that so many people in the cities are caught up in this. There's no escape. There's no escape. Whole subcultures are now. There's just no way out. In the affluent suburbs, yes, there's still a way out if they want to take it. But when you look at many areas of our big cities, they're doomed.
They're doomed.
They're doomed. And the people know they're doomed. The heaviest incidence of drug use is in your low income levels, areas. That shocked me when I found that out. With people just trying to forget, I suppose. And you can look at it from this arena here in a clearer perspective than you can when you're sitting down, say, in San Francisco or Los Angeles. We're undergoing a tragedy within society. And it may not fully evolve maybe for 10 or 20 years.
It's almost as though they sense the end, whether it has to do with the Soviets or things we know not, and they're behaving like lemmings. They're going to rush to their destruction, almost by a force, which does make us turn again to psychotronics. I mean, it is, one can call it karma, one can call it the age, but there seems to be another ingredient that is impelling it, whereby they are no longer in control of their own minds.
It's almost as if there is a force or a power outside the Soviets and outside our elite.
Well, the only ones we know about outside of all of this are the UFOs, and they have a superior technology. I believe that they have genetically engineered the human race to limit that race, to not be able to rise to their levels. We are showing breakthroughs today in space, which is probably alarming to them, because this is a very important planet for resources, for water, for refueling. They've been around for centuries. Drawings of UFOs, as you know, appear in ancient writings on the walls of primitives and so forth. So there are beings that could accomplish this conceivably.
How is it that so many of us can escape it?
I think it's the power of God. I think that light itself, the light of God, actually penetrates the body's cells, and that God gave His creation a divine spark, which is a sacred fire that we each have in our hearts, and that the power of this sacred fire is greater than all other material power.
But it's still not strong enough for us to live within society, outside society.
No, it's strong enough to take us out of that society while the rest of the people are trapped. And so we come apart and be a separate people, as the ancient prophets told us we had to do. And I think that that is the untouchable element in the creation who descended from God. And I think that there's another creation, a mechanization man that was created by fallen angels who had this genetic engineering capacity, and that they could create a robot creation, a test tube creature, but they could never endow it with a divine spark. And this creature they could totally manipulate. So it was in their best interest to multiply this pattern, to create masses who would carry out their designs, could be programmable by such waves and frequencies, and could defeat then the few who were actually the seed of Christ on the planet by their sheer numbers. And so God gave us a key that the seed of light should unite together so that they would not have to stand alone against this foreboding crowd of the antithesis of reality.
Well, could I ask you a question? Why did you come to this particular spot? You know, ever since I got here yesterday, let me be frank with you, which I usually am. I was driving down from Livingston, and as I came down this valley, I got this feeling of a strong power within the valley. Well, man, I'm obviously telling you something you already know, so I haven't got it to finish. So I guess you have a reason for being here.
I think that the power you feel shows the power of the sons and daughters of God when they use the science of the spoken word to endow a physical location with the power of God, because they have a threefold flame. Now, that is apart from why we chose to be here. But I think the power you feel is the fact that thousands of people have come here at these conferences, and hundreds of people live here, and on a daily basis invoke the power of God for the protection of themselves and for all light bearers in the world, for the protection of freedom and those things we hold dear, to try to stem the tide of this downward course of civilization by a light that can be invoked from the spiritual planes, which does not descend to this octave unless we call it forth. And there is a power in this valley that comes from the people who live here, but that antedates their coming and which also drew them here.
Is it not related to geographical location?
I think it is located to geographical location in terms of the crisscrossing of energy fields on the planet. But what we understand is that the Royal Teton Range, the Grand Teton Mountain, is an ancient focus of a spiritual hierarchy of ascended masters and archangels, and that it is consecrated with a great spiritual power. Our coming to this place goes back 2,000 years ago, for me, to the time of Jesus, when I remember having been his disciple Martha, and when he prophesied to me that we would reincarnate and be here again 2,000 years later, and that he would direct us to a place prepared in the new world where we would gather, and the light bearers of the world would gather in this place. And so I remember, as Jesus recalled this scene for me, that I was quite astonished as to how he would accomplish such a feat. He would be ascended, we would still be in embodiment. It would be a strange land. We would come here and we would know the place in a vast wilderness. So he promised me that he would place a mark upon that place that would be unmistakable, and it would be that sign, and it would quicken the inner soul memory. And that sign was a giant jet of water coming out of the earth. And this water would have the appearance almost of fire when it would come out of the earth. This was even more astounding to me. What was astonishing about this experience is that we found and located this place by divine direction, it meeting all the spiritual and physical requirements, an inner retreat as well as a place to be self-sufficient agriculturally and economically by being able to raise livestock and grow our own crops and so forth. So after we had purchased the property, it was then that Jesus quickened in me the memory of this prior experience. And then I realized the sign was Old Faithful, and it was unmistakable. And all my life I had been drawn to Old Faithful, but I had never been to see it before we purchased this property. So we feel that there is, if you would have it, an electromagnetic field connected with this property and the adjacent wilderness lands, park territory, forest territory, going all the way to the Grand Teton, which is about 79 miles as the eagle flies from here. So this particular valley is very precious because we feel in this particular place where the tent is, and in this entire valley, which we call the heart, we feel the pulsations of Gautama Buddha as having established his western Shambhala, corresponding to that ancient focus of Sanat Kumara in the Gobi Desert. And there is a correlation of the lines of force in the earth between these spiritual retreats of the Brotherhood. And we feel that this land was prepared and preserved for us by Jesus and by Saint Germain. So that's why we're here.
Thank you. Well, I must make one comment. You certainly picked an isolated spot. I mean, Montana itself is isolated, but you have to pick an isolated spot within Montana.
Well, it's a very secure sense that you feel here.
Oh, yes.
Whenever I flew up from Los Angeles to Bozeman Airport and I would put my feet on the ground, the earth would feel solid. And I would only know by contrast that Los Angeles earth really never felt solid. Mm-hmm. But the amazing thing about it is this is not really the kind of place that all of these people would follow someone to, unless they in their own hearts had the same inner magnetism drawing them to those same energies. And I think that the power you feel, for one thing, shows the sensitivity that you can only have by the flame of the heart. Only the inner fire can give you a reading on the spiritual power that is here. If it were otherwise, people would have long ago claimed this place as something extraordinary, but they were not sensitive to it, and it remained sealed until we should have come. And we feel it's a very important spot to preserve, as you call it, sanity, the clarity of mind necessary to defeat the forces, whatever they are, whoever they are, that seem to be defeating civilization entirely.
What happens if large numbers of people decide they want sanity and flock out of the cities into Corwin Springs?
Well, they have the whole Yellowstone Park, Forest Service, and wilderness to flock to. You know, this is private property. I don't think they're going to decide to do that because it's hard to make it here economically.
Yes.
The summers are short, the winters are long. There's a lot more ideal places to be. Anyway, we've been here since '81. We haven't seen any mass exodus from the cities up here.
No, but I sense the deterioration, as you mentioned, in the cities. A lot of people are beginning to be very concerned. Where do we go? If they all suddenly wake up one morning and decide that they're going to come to Corwin Springs,
I guess we have to cross that bridge when we come to it, don't we?
Well, I must say I very much enjoyed my visit here.
Well, we're not done because you hear that rain?
Excuse me?
We're not done yet because you hear the rain? The rain reminds us that you haven't said a word about weather manipulation by the Soviets.
Oh, yes. Well,
especially in connection with the Challenger and other defeats in our space program.
Well, let me summarize. There are three ways basically to manipulate the weather. The traditional way used, I think the Air Force spends about $200 million a year on this first method, which is dumping silver iodide crystals into clouds, and that creates rainfall. It's very primitive. It's not accurate. It creates chemical pollution, and it's on the way out. The second method is used by the Soviets. Well, the Soviets used the first method still. They are developing a second method based on Nikola Tesla's work, the magnifying transmitter. They can induce standing waves, use these standing waves to divert the jet stream. By diverting the jet stream at the upper levels, you change global weather. This probably has happened in the last few years. It's become much wetter in some areas, much colder in the United States. It's become actually much warmer in some parts of the Soviet Union. These are gigantic, almost global effects brought about by changing the jet stream. I mentioned it in connection with Challenger, in which by changing the jet stream, they brought colder weather down over Florida. That's the second way. The third way is very new. I only came across it. They came to me about 4 or 5 months ago. A man called Trevor Constable, who is electronics engineer on the Matson Line container ships. They have been doing a whole series of experiments with what they call primary energy, which is the ether, the belt of primary energy around the Earth. They have constructed weather guns. Weather guns operate basically as a function of the speed of the vessel against the movement of this belt of energy and the shape and construction of the gun. They can now bring down rainfall just about wherever they want it. I hope it's not responsible for this today. I think I sent you a tape of some of the experiments. They've got a lot further than that. So there's basically these three different methods. The Soviets are aware of the Constable method. They called it the plasmoid energy. But so far as I know, they're not using it. So basically you have three methods.
Now, last year we had a terrific drought in the southeastern United States. Would you attribute that to weather manipulation?
Yes. Yeah, because we know the Soviets have changed the jet stream. The changes in the jet stream would have brought about the increased cold weather in some areas, increased rainfall in other areas, that kind of end result, yes.
So it becomes a warfare again.
I think the Soviets today are using psychotronics and warfare using Tesla techniques against us.
What about producing lightning a la Tesla?
Oh, well, Tesla can do it. That was proved in his experiments in Colorado in the turn of the century.
But do the Soviets do it?
Excuse me?
Do the Soviets do it?
Oh, yes.
Have they used it against our rockets?
I seem to recall a report in which they used ball lightning against ours. Constable can definitely produce it. I have some tremendous photographs using his method of producing fork lightning over Los Angeles Bay. In fact, I'll have another video available maybe in about 30 days showing this. So yes, you can create lightning.
In terms of this primary energy, you describe it as being clean and cheap, freely accessible by anyone with technical expertise. It sounds almost too good to be true. What's that going to do to the energy companies, this primary energy you're interested in?
Well, first of all, there is a prerequisite. The operator has to know what it's doing. What it will do if it becomes generally accepted, if it can be done, your whole existing infrastructure, your transportation systems, steel industry, everything we know is going to suddenly become outdated. Because here you've got a clean, cost-free source of energy. The weather guns they use to bring about rainfall, the raw material cost is about $20. In fact, you have enough PVC pipes sitting over there to make 100 weather guns. I saw it this morning. You have to know how to make them, and the operators have to know how to use them. So what you've got is a very low capital cost item where you need operator skill, and this will bring about in the 21st century, I think, a revolution in the way we use energy. The key is the conversion of this primary belt, this energy belt, into driving a rotary shaft, spinning a shaft. Once we can make an engine out of it, once we can use this energy to make an engine, then that's the end of the internal combustion engine, atomic energy, diesel engines, that whole era which began 100 years ago.
Well, who's into this and how near are they in using this primary energy?
The key man is Trevor Constable. He's electronics engineer for the Matson line, electronics man. Some of his key assistants have worked for companies like Boeing. So these are not run-of-the-mill ordinary engineers. These are top-level engineers. How far along they can control rainfall, and I wish they were here now. They can extinguish forest fires. They can remove fog and smog at very low cost. They say that a Dutch group has been able to solve the rotary motion problem and develop an engine, but I've not yet seen that engine in operation. I'd say it's about 5 or 10 years away.
5 or 10 years away. You think it's not going to get suppressed? It's going to get into the hands of the people?
Well, Constable is aware of the establishment, is aware of the Soviets. He has been training people to operate these weather guns, but of course they could be suppressed.
This itself could totally change the configuration of space, of strategic defense, of the Soviet and the U.S. confrontation.
I think it already has done. We talked about psychotronic warfare, we talked about weather warfare. With these two things alone, the Soviets could defeat the United States without us even knowing there was a war going on.
Well, I think it's already happening.
Yes.
I think the Soviets are successfully beaming waves that are making people jump out of buildings and doing all kinds of things. And I think they have this, I don't know what to call it except a satanic mind, but they like to let you know they're in control in subtle ways, and they like to just observe the torture of putting a population in a torture chamber and watching it disintegrate and not even knowing that it's being victimized.
Yes, yes.
I don't think there's any defense against psychotronics except to raise one's vibration. And that's why I made the album The Only Way to Go Is Up. You have to go up in vibration to escape psychotronics because they can only hit at a certain level.
Well, theoretically, if you transmit on another frequency to counterbalance the destructive frequency, it's like anti-noise, will eliminate noise. I have the circuit diagrams for an instrument which the West Germans are using.
You said you were going to bring us a set that they got left home, right?
The circuit diagram, yes, I forgot to bring it. But I will make it available to you. Apparently it protects you for about 3 feet, radius of 3 feet.
And what does this protection accomplish?
Well, it neutralizes the destructive frequency.
And
so if they're beaming 11 hertz at you, it will neutralize, you adjust your instrument to neutralize 11 hertz, which would create the riot. 11 hertz would create the riot here.
And if you know how and if you have the diagrams, you can build this.
Oh yes, I've got the circuit diagrams. You cannot import them into the United States. The Food and Drug Administration,
Food and drug?
in its wisdom, thinks you shouldn't have them. But you can call it anything you want to. You can call it a toy and still manufacture it.
Can you create disease and abnormalities in cells and cell function?
Yes.
By these waves?
You can create disease with waves. Yes.
You know, the Soviets are very vociferous about accusing us of having created AIDS. Does that tell you anything about the Soviets?
Yes, a guilty conscience. Well, a guilty something. Yeah, I'm quite convinced they're using both psychotronic warfare and weather warfare.
Now, to neutralize the energy and also to capture this this universal energy that is all around is going to make a big difference.
Yes.
In life. I'd like you to sum up and tell the camera what you'd like to tell the American people as a result of your research. What are the most important steps to take? What action can we take now that we have this awareness?
You mean assuming that people are aware of what's going on?
Well, let's take this group.
This group?
These people are from all over the world and the United States, and they're very aware and they're action-oriented. They want to take action based on their awareness.
Oh, well, yes, I think my words would be quite clear to take back specific messages from here and talk, and convert and make people aware of what you know and what you believe in.
Once people become aware from your standpoint and what you know, what is the action to take to turn things around?
First of all, you have to get numbers, large numbers of people aware. And then, I don't know, it depends. If we're in the middle of chaos, then all we can do is just retreat into the forest. But if we're still as we are today with a certain amount of political activity, I suppose one could go the congressional route, although that seems pretty hopeless. Political activity seems to be less and less likely as a solution as we go along. It may be that we may have to just live through the cataclysm, the chaos, and emerge at the other side.
Be survivors.
Be survivors. Learn to be a survivor. I think it may well come down to that. Too many people, particularly in the big cities, as long as they get their payroll check or the welfare check, as long as that arrives on a specific day each month, they're not thinking beyond that particular day. That's the danger. People are unwilling to look at bad news and act on the basis of bad news. So you may go back and you may be wasting your time in talking to people, but you may find more converts, more recruits. But that I can't answer how many.
Well, I think you're right about surviving, because inside of yourself you sense the hope that if things are this bleak, there has to be a brighter tomorrow. And if we can survive to that tomorrow, we can build a new world. We can even build a golden age.
If I can be honest, I don't think we've begun to see the bad side, the chaos that is ahead. I don't think we've begun to see it.
Everything you're talking about, if you simply track it into the future, its end is chaos.
Yes.
Cataclysm.
Yes.
Disintegration of matter.
Yes.
Minds.
Yes. And the whole thing may have to disintegrate before we can rebuild it.
I think that the difference between this group and those in the cities is that we have perceived clearly that
Yes.
there is a divine will that wants us to survive.
Yes.
And we are determined to do so because someone must bear the torch of civilization and a spiritual teaching into the future.
Apparently everybody has made a personal commitment to survive and to carry the torch forward.
They wouldn't be here if they hadn't. Tony Sutton, you've done it again. You've been the flame of freedom that speaks at Summit University Forum, and we thank you.
Thank you very much.
You've been watching Summit University Forum with Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Summit University Forum, where the flame of freedom speaks. Elizabeth Clare Prophet, noted author, lecturer, and educator, interviews the special people who provide the missing dimension to the news that affects you. Courageous men and women from all over the world who have taken a stand for truth and justice and become spokesmen for the flame of freedom. If you would like to know more, call this number or write this address.